Good morning to everybody. For those of our guests joining in from Europe, Asia Pacific, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Parag Samar, President and Chief Strategy Officer at Magic EdTech, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the first of the series of webinars on data management in the education space. The focus today is going to be getting ahead and, more importantly, beyond the data integration challenges that plague us in the education space. Joining me on today's discussion is an eminent panel, my colleague from Magic EdTech, Eric Stano, Vice President, Consulting, Curriculum and Product Strategy, over 30 years of hands-on experience in the education sector. Jan Crow, the Global Head for Data Innovation Lab at EDMC, and I'll introduce EDMC in a moment. Jan has been involved in several initiatives and business ventures with a common theme being innovation. And Eric Bigelson, the head of strategic business development at EDMC. Ever since I've known Eric, his biggest contribution, as I know, is providing a sense of direction and standardization to the evolving data on ESG standards. Eric, of course, has been involved in several other initiatives and good developments in the past. So what do we have today? What are the key takeaways from the webinar that we expect today? We spoke about getting beyond the data challenges. We've been talking about standards. How do we go beyond the focus that we have today of compliance and alignment and maybe move on to more targeted outcomes? How do we leverage the information available in the standards to achieve targeted outcomes? In this context, we would like to introduce the importance of standard data models and taxonomy. We'll also be talking about the aspect of ontology, which Jan will be talking of in more detail. But what is the importance of data models and taxonomy in the leveraging standards for targeted outcomes? Also in the same context, introducing EDMC, Enterprise Data Management Council, a thought leader in the area of data management, and more importantly, enabling data for achieving some meaningful outcomes. And in today's world, anything without mention of AI is incomplete and outdated. So finally, how do we get your data ecosystem ready for the Gen AI space or the larger AI space as well? We call it cognifying your data. We'll talk about that as part of the conversation today. Let me hand over to my colleague Eric Stano, who will talk about some of the data challenges and what is he seeing as part of his role as a practitioner. Over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Parag, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's here, depending on where you are. Again, my name is Eric Stano, and I'd like to start this off by quoting an editorial director I had at John Wiley & Sons all the way back in 1993. She used to bemoan the fact that we're all so busy working, we don't have time to do our jobs. And that is what, at a high level, we're really talking about today relative to data integration, and data utilization. Any of us who are in the learning ecosystem, education broadly speaking, whether we're at an institution, a company that supports an institution or a district, whether you're an educator or a professional, everybody is using or has access to literally thousands of products and platforms relative to learning, to students' learning journeys or their own. And despite the existence of several learning data standards, the interoperability and aggregation of these data across multiple products and platforms continues to be a huge job. And in theory, all these standards that are available together can solve this challenge of integration and ultimately being able to act intuitively and easily on the data that we have gathered relative to our own journeys or our student journeys. But in reality, these standards are still adhered to in silos that often don't speak to one another. Now, there are efforts relative to remediating this. One of our partners, in addition to the EDM Council, who's with us today, One EdTech used to be the IMS Global Learning Consortium. LTI Advantage aims to address some of these challenges, focusing on grade and data transfer. So there are others besides us who are trying to chip away at this, but the challenge of integrating all of these data persists.
I actually wanted to use this infographic. I came across this in one of the websites, and I thought this was a very good representation of the number of disparate learning standards that we have relating to data. Largely categorized into two main categories: stakeholder data and content data. And then within that, in layers such as the data dictionary, which is the taxonomy and ontology, the data models, we spoke about data models, the serialization and the protocol. A lot of the standards that we have seen would either take one of these layers, the protocol layer or the logical data model, whatever it is. And as Eric mentioned, we need to be consistent across and look at it in totality and not just in silos. A very important aspect is the one which is the content related data. And this is something which I'm really excited about, because not only does it help build meaningful content that can align to various state standards and various objectives, but more importantly, how do we leverage this to achieve the cognification of the data, which is what we are really focusing on. So I thought this represented the situation very well, and borrowed it to be honest. But this will give you a good idea as to where we stand. Eric?
So just pressing the case a little bit more relative to the need to have actionable integrated data from a huge variety of sources with which we're all grappling on a daily basis. These are just some use cases just to bring the conversation down to the real world, and some problem statements. So just by way of example, for instance, if you are at a company and you suss out that there is a skills gap in the educational market that you are speaking to, and say you are an EdTech company, a startup, and you have capabilities that can address that skills challenge, how are you going to secure funding without data that support your assertion, clean, understandable, actionable data to do that? If you are an instructor or part of a department, and you are trying to design accelerated pathways so students can have a more efficient, effective academic journey and evade the notion of wasted credits, how are you going to actually design and build that accelerated pathway without the data you need to support what is going to actually constitute a more effective or efficient journey for those students? If you are an instructor or a teacher and you are using platforms and products in your classroom, how are you going to justify their inclusion? How do you know that they are supplying your students with the content or the support relative to skills that is going to enable them to achieve the objectives that your particular state has outlined in its standards? Relative to just navigating the diversity of skill levels and preparedness that students bring with them into a classroom, if you're attempting to personalize a curriculum and provide discrete interventions for students who might be potentially more challenged, again, you're going to require data to design those interventions and make sure that they're getting to the right student. And ultimately, this is all about improving educational outcomes. And if you are an enterprise who is supplying a learning environment or a learning product to students, how are you going to transparently communicate with them the data and the insights that they need to further their own journey? So all of these use cases, and these are just a handful among a legion, really go to the point that having data from the variety of sources in an easy, interoperable way and being able to act on it, that is all further to the point I made at the start, which is that we're busy working to gather these data, but ultimately we want to do our jobs, which is improving the learning environment in which our students are operating. And further to that, not to gild the lily, but we all know this, there are a variety of data masters, and these are sources and quadrants in which data exist on ostensibly really the same population. I'll just simplify it by talking about students. But even among just a student, the data that is gathered on them and housed and managed, is varied, comes from and exists in various sources. And ostensibly, a lot of it intersects and is relative to, again, that same student, but may have differences depending on the source of that information. So student information systems contain information on the student themselves, their grade level, their enrollments in various courses, their achievement and progress. The learning resources that are in use by that student will have information they carry with them on the format of that content. Is it an ebook? Is it a homework platform? Their accessibility. How does that content that the student is consuming there, how does that actually align with the standards that everybody is laboring toward? There are credentials and frameworks, records of the milestones that students have achieved and where they are relative to their learning journey. There's information on the people that orbit a particular student, educators, staff. There are financial aid, and there's financial aid information, support services, and even for the institution or the company themselves, there's data relative to enrollment and acquisition that is harnessed to market that institution or that company to the world at large. Again, a lot of these sources of data trammel through the very same types of data, but may call things something slightly different. And getting a holistic, comprehensive, coherent picture of whatever it is you are trying to harness that data for continues to be a challenge.
Thanks, Eric. So just wanted to kind of ask the audience. We spoke about some of the questions that typically would come to mind that need answers. Eric spoke about them. He spoke about the various data masters. Would be interesting to know from the audience which of these are relevant to you. Which of these questions are top of your mind? And I might add that feel free to put them in the chat. Also, feel free to put your questions or clarifications that you might have, maybe your observations in the chat. You agree vehemently with something that one of us is saying, maybe you don't agree with something that one of us has said. So feel free to put that. We'll take some time at the end of the webinar to address those. And if we don't get time, then we will definitely respond back to all of you in a more detailed manner. So talking about, I did mention that we will introduce the importance of data models and taxonomy. Why is this important? Because we see that despite the presence of interoperability standards, everybody says that yes, we adhere to these standards and we tick the box. We still find that there are challenges in terms of passing data, integration, aggregation, consolidation. And we believe this is largely caused by the presence of non-standard data models or taxonomy or ontology. This inhibits the data interoperability, which causes islands of data. So what do users do to overcome this? They create local applications or data stores, which honestly defeats the whole purpose. But they do this to bridge the gaps, because without this, they're not going to be able to consolidate data across various silos. Also, increasingly in today's world, data or content is coming from sources outside the education system. And this is going to become even more relevant as we get into the whole concept of Gen AI. And this content is definitely not required to align with education standards and state standards. There is a lot of content that has been accumulated over the years, and this is something which has not been properly tagged in line with some of the standards like CASE or SCORM, and as a result of which it does not lend itself well to consolidating the content, maybe bringing it together on a common platform and all that. So how do we make sense out of all of this? How do we understand the source and, more important, the solution to these challenges? And which is where I believe there's a very strong emphasis on aspects of data governance and data quality management. This is something that I've learned a lot from my colleagues at EDMC. And I would like to invite Eric Bigelson to educate us on aspects of data governance and data quality management, and to some extent EDMC. Eric?
Thank you, Parag, and very nice meeting everybody on the webinar today. The EDM Council, short for Enterprise Data Management Council, was established in 2005, coming out of the financial service industry, mainly because regulators were really concerned about, the quality of data management and data governance affecting the financial system. We're basically advocates for data management and data analytics. We have a couple basic principles around responsible data-driven organizations and data literacy for all, not just for the folks in the data organization. And what we do is, as a neutral nonprofit global trade association, we collaborate, bring together, various organizations representing different areas of the ecosystem to talk about some of the challenges that they have and to focus on developing data management best practices and standards. We're global with over 350 member organizations and 25,000 professionals participating, in the EDM Council today. If you could advance the slide. Here's just a short list of those 350 members, and you could see many influential names in the industry. Many on the left side come from financial services, but you could see other organizations like AWS, Google, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, CVS, Firestone. You also see regulators like the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and others. Many of the regulators themselves, have similar challenges in data management and are members of the council, and they're actually using some of the council resources and also participating in sort of the development collaboratively of some of these best practices. And I would assume in the education space, we'll see more of that as well over time. A couple of the frameworks that the council's developed, again, collaboratively with industry. The very most important one is DCAM, the Data Management Capability Assessment Model. And not to go into this in great depth because you get some information off our website, but basically it's a logical model that takes a look at all the different aspects of what you would need to create a data management program. Everything from a foundational layer, establishing, the funding and the actual strategy and business case, through the execution layer of establishing everything from, the business and data architecture, looking at data quality management, data governance, and then going out towards establishing data controls and then effective analytics management. Really important, and it's an auditable framework that's used by probably 70% of our membership. And in some cases, some of the regulators have even endorsed the use of DCAM, for the marketplace. We saw that from the Federal Reserve. We've seen that from some of the other financial regulators in Europe and Canada. And it's a very powerful, very logical model that really helps organizations get their arms around data management, data governance, and data quality. Next
And
slide.
Eric, if I might add over here, I remember you mentioning to me that organizations can actually scale themselves on this model to see how they perform, and also compare with how their peers in the same industry are performing. So what is the extent of the maturity that you have. I thought
Right.
that was an important that to mention too.
Absolutely, Parag. A lot more behind it, but basically self-assessments, can be done. Many organizations rely upon authorized partners, various consulting firms to help them with, more detailed assessments. Those scores could be grossed up into various industry benchmarking that the council does, some of which are available on the council's website. But it's a very, very powerful tool that could be used to really help organizations get much better in their data management. The next slide, I think, will show CDMC, which is the Cloud Data Management Capability Framework. And this was developed by over 100 different organizations, and 300 practitioners, including Microsoft, Google, IBM, Snowflake, Informatica, half the GSIBs, the systemically important banks, to really focus on creating automated controls, leveraging off of the framework from DCAM to really establish the appropriate governance, and procedures and policy to protect sensitive data. Initially, it was designed for protecting sensitive data as organizations migrate the data to their cloud, various cloud sources, but also it's very effective for managing data anywhere. on-prem, in the cloud, and also some of these controls are now being used for AI governance, through one of the special interest groups that the council is leading. Interestingly enough, many of the automated controls, key controls, could be used for that as well, whether it comes to security controls, data privacy, looking at entitlements, looking at data ownership. Very powerful. It's a free license that's available to any organization to use. So again, please take a look at it on the website. Okay. Before I turn it over to Jan, for a discussion on the Data Innovation Lab, just two other points I want to make. I think earlier Eric and Parag, you were talking about data interoperability and consistency, which lead to standardization. In the end, it's all about having trusted, reliable, data that you're confident in using to drive business decisions, to make better business decisions, to create business value, and to reduce risk. Interoperability is critical, and I think that's really where the handoff is to standards and standardization. So with that, Jan, please take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Very pleased to meet you. I had the privilege of being responsible for the Data Innovation Lab, as mentioned earlier. The Data Innovation Lab is a very specific part of the council where we actually focus as our core activity on the collaborative development of and facilitation of the development of open industry standards. And as you can see, there are a number of these initiatives. We have developed FIBO, the Financial Industry Business Ontology, which is the largest ontology in the financial industry space. We are right now working on a extremely interesting project called IDMP, Identification of Medicinal Products Ontology. And to give you a sense of what we do it and how we do it, and why it's really bringing a lot of value and benefits to all the players involved in these things, I'll talk a little bit about how this IDMPO project came around. So it all stems from a set of ISO standards called IDMP standards, which will be required to be implemented by all the pharma companies, and specifically in Europe, this is coming in next year. So if you imagine a set of ISO standards, you have a pile of paper, which is probably, I don't know, 20 centimeters or bigger. And obviously, all these pharma companies are taking these standards and trying to implement them in-house. Despite standards being standards, there are obviously discrepancies in these implementations that are slightly different. So still the interoperability and exchange of information between these companies and between regulators and these companies is not that great. So that's how we started discussing with a number of the pharma companies, an idea to build an ontological representation of all these standards. And now the important thing is that an ontology actually enables greater interoperability, because for those of you that do not really work with ontologies on a daily basis, an ontology is basically a model of a specific knowledge domain, for example, banking or pharma or whatever it can be. And an ontology defines, provides very specific and immutable definitions for all the concepts within this space. And also it describes precisely the relationships between these concepts. So once we have an ontology, it's a definitive model for a specific knowledge domain. So we started with a small project, an MVP for 6 months, where we had one simple use case with 6 pharma companies. Next year, it was 11 pharma companies. This year, it's back to 6 because they are now focusing on actually implementing the ontology in-house as we are driving this towards almost completion in terms of the development of IDMPO. Now, you can imagine that that all these companies working together, despite the fact that they are obviously head-on competitors in the market reality, they are all sitting in at the same table. We are all working together on agreeing the definitions for these ISO-related IDMPO standards and the definitions for the relationships between the concepts. And that way, we're building something that has caught attention of the regulators. ISO is now talking about making our ontology a formal representation, technical representation of their standards, which is a big thing in this space. And the project has gained a lot of visibility. It's really getting quite popular, so to say. Now, one other thing that I wanted to mention, as per Parag's comment earlier, ontologies are fundamental to the performance of AI models. And the reason is, to put it simply, that an ontology is a model, is a map that enables AI engines to navigate properly through certain spaces. And that way, you can actually, and that has been proven by various experiments, that way you actually reduce hallucinations and improve the accuracy of answers generated by AI models by around 300%. So that's huge. And with that, I would pass it back to you, Parag.
Thank you, Jan. In fact, if I might say so, Jan, if there's one single aspect, if I'm forced to identify one aspect, which is the defining feature of today's conversation, is what you just mentioned about the importance of ontology in ensuring that AI models are a lot more accurate and a lot more, to the point and with minimal hallucinations.
Absolutely.
So let me present the first point of view that we've developed in consultation with our partners, some of our customers, and internal stakeholders, is the fact that for us to address the issue of data challenges, the solution is not more standards or better standards. It is actually the whole pyramid. Starting with the library of standards, which is just the tip. It could be interoperability standards like LTI-ATFA, it could be content-related standards like SCORM case. But then if they're not backed up by standardized data models and taxonomy, what typically would happen is that your data can pass from one application to the other, but when you start aggregating it, when you start consolidating it, if you do not have standardized data models, the data elements are not going to map to each other and they will not be able to come together. So you will not be able to get those aggregations and consolidations, and therefore your ability to do something meaningful from the data is going to be lost. And assuming that you do achieve this, you do have standardized data models and standardized taxonomy, while we did not go into the details and specifics of data quality management and data governance, you'll find, as Eric Bigelsen said, more details on the EDMC website. But the important thing is that they define best practices, they define the frameworks, and they define the key elements that comprise data quality management and data governance. I was on a webinar the other day, and a very important point in data governance made by one of the panelists was that, data governance is not like a raging fire that you need to go put out, otherwise your house is going to burn down. But it's like one of those things that's going to keep building on itself, and suddenly one day you'll wake up and you'll find a huge, either a fire or maybe your foundations have been eaten through or something like that. So this is the pyramid, and then anchoring this, really putting it together, is the aspect of ontology, which Jan mentioned. And the reason why we feel that is because without eventually leveraging this data to achieve something, whether it be AI or some meaningful searches or consolidating it, it's going to be meaningless. And therefore, if you do not envelop this entire pyramid using concepts of data ontology, standardized ontology, you are probably going to be missing out on a huge opportunity. If you go to the next one, what we've done is we've taken the liberty of creating what we call as analogous and homogeneous systems. We created three systems that I believe would cover the entire gamut of what we have in the education space. The systems of record, which is typically where you store and capture static data. A lot of data needs to be passed amongst each other, each of these systems. Some of them are going to be coming together in terms of providing you a data element for further analysis and all of that. And this is something which is important in order for you to bring all of the data together. We spoke about systems of content. There are various standards available in systems of content, but increasingly, if you want to bring all the systems together onto a common platform, then we believe this is the homogeneous analogous area that we have to leverage in bringing it together. And finally, the systems of reporting. This is something which we know that many of our colleagues in the institutions, higher ed and K-12, struggle on a regular basis to put together the various reports that they have to submit to the various agencies. Simply because the data is in a very fragmented, siloed manner, it is not consistent across. The requirements of the reporting are different from what the requirement that they have for internal use and all of that. And so therefore we said that this is something which is relevant to us in terms of reporting, and together I think these would represent the entire gamut of the education space. What I'll do now is to request Eric Stano, to talk about how do we leverage all of this to go beyond the integration and into something more meaningful, which is really the, I would say, icing on the cake for today's conversation. Eric?
Right, and by way of sort of bringing this all together, I'm at some risk of being reductive, but let me bring it back down to somewhat education related specifically, and characterize this in what I would term as sort of civilian terms. We've heard the terms, ontology, standardized data models, and various systems of reporting. But throwing this into sharp relief relative to education, as I alluded to earlier, the holy grail in education is really being able to extract actionable insights from all of these data and be able to predict and influence the outcomes that students achieve. Now, static data can be meaningfully reported with some proper data management. Parag has spoken on that, despite the fact that currently it is overly siloed and in disparate applications. But real-time insights and trends, which are of much greater value, particularly in the fluid educational space, really require online collection, integration, rationalization, normalization, and analysis to be able to act on them. And achieving this level of integration really calls for either a customized or a configurable solution to help lead to, again, actionable insights that will lead, therefore, to significantly improved outcomes. So going beyond that, that's sort of the problem statement and a reflection on the need for a customizable or configurable solution here. That would have been true 24 months ago. It is even more true today in a world in which AI is playing such an outsized role in everything that we do. It has significantly altered the landscape in education relative to all the systems and products and items that are in use in education. Adhering to standards and maintaining learning efficacy that used to require a great deal of effort in developing content to ensure that it is adhering to standards and achieving the right outcomes. That was done by often brute force and required a real substantial lift. Now, in this new world, in part because of the presence of AI, content segmentation, the use of consistent keywords in the context of taxonomies and ontologies are enhancing the AI-influenced ecosystem in which we're all operating. So we're now able to process and aggregate disparate content more effectively. This speeds up the entire process of content alignment, but it also enables really the systematic creation of content in order to be able to scale and meet those learning goals and doing so more effectively. And all of this, the quantification of content using a standard skills taxonomy and an ontology behind that, we're not only able to achieve speed in developing content that the students will be consuming, we can now more precisely answer the question of the content that is being created, really answering the question, what are the roles and skills for which we're training? If I have content, for instance, on the Battle of Hastings in 1066, we can know that it is not just covering the content of that particular battle and the date on which that battle took place. That piece of content may, in fact, be teaching our students to become better critical thinkers, to develop oral or better written fluency. It may be in the context of helping them collaborate, a skill that is going to be used in the workforce. There's so much more we can know, so many more questions we can answer relative to the new world in which we exist. And all of the things that Eric and Parag and Jan have reflected on will only help enable us to get there that much more effectively.
Thanks, Eric. Coming to the end of the discussion, I really wanted to sum up all the points that were made. We spoke about creating these three systems, which are, kind of homogeneous and analogous in themselves, but at the same time, kind of interact with each other. We spoke about how these systems bring together common aspects, but then what are the outcomes of these systems? What is it going to get you? The systems of record, if properly addressed, can help us analyze and predict the outcomes, and therefore allow us to influence the student outcomes. Increasingly, Stano spoke about securing funding as an example as one of the objectives. Increasingly, funding is made available only if you achieve certain targeted outcomes. And if you can't influence it, then you're probably not going to get the funding. So it's extremely important that we use the systems of record, not just to connect the various data elements, but to actually use it to do some meaningful analysis and prediction. Systems of content, and as I said, the single most defining aspect of today's conversation is, how is this going to help us in the AI world that we are getting into, or we're already into? And as Jan said, a proper, well-defined ontology that allows us to create hierarchies and relations across various concepts will allow us to create a system of content which can break the content into more quantifiable elements that can then be verified, that can be aggregated, they can be interrelated, and that will allow us to leverage content in the whole AI space. It'll allow us to make a lot more meaningful sense out of the content we have. And all of this will achieve in generating or creating a single source of truth, which ideally is what we should be using for all our reporting, be that for our reporting agencies or be that for even internal use. And this is something which we believe is the way forward. This is how we can leverage all the information and wealth of knowledge available when people have gone and developed those various standards for different requirements. How do we bring it together? One of the things that EDMC does very well is to actually promote user groups, a kind of an affinity group. And we might say that probably a group of higher ed institutes, maybe school districts, maybe publishers coming together and firstly defining what do they want to achieve out of this, and maybe participating in creating standard ontologies that can be used firstly to integrate their own platforms and products, and then of course get integration across the industry. EDMC has done a great job facilitating this. They'll bring a lot of thought leadership in this. They have access to some really innovative work that Jan and his team are doing out of Warsaw in Poland. So we can bring that together. And the idea is to use this to help our students come out as better informed, better learned individuals. And the students need not just be school or higher ed students, they could be professionals continuing their education, they could be individuals wanting to do some self-learning and what have you. So with this, we come to the end of our session. We have a few questions that I would like to just call out and answer. So the first one is from Olivia. How do non-standard data models and taxonomies ontologies inhibit data interoperability? And that's simply because as various platforms and various applications pass data, if your data do not have the same properties in terms of how they're defined and how they are constructed, they will not come together. You will not be able to add an alpha field and a numeric field together because they will be inconsistent. If you name those data elements differently, and if you say that, okay, I want to create a aggregated view of, let's say, students, and if you define students as only those who go to a kind of a defined institute like a school or a higher ed, and let's say in that you now start coming across students who are doing virtual schooling, maybe professionals, data will not come together, it won't aggregate, and that's how you're not going to be able to have some kind of integrated data. Eric Bickelson, you want to add some more flavor to this?
I think in the end, you get to data quality. That to me is still one of the most critical things. And we've been using computers for quite some time to do a lot of hard lifting for us. But it's only until recently that the world has woken up to the fact that data quality, data consistency, the ability to connect data together is absolutely critical. And it's for answering questions, making better decisions. It's to protecting sensitive data and maintaining privacy while you still want to share some of the data at the same time, but doing it in a very responsible, ethical way. And we have as a broad industry, in data management, challenges. We're not splitting the atom, but we need to, get everybody aligned within industry, to think about how do you create interoperable data schema throughout the ecosystem so data could be effectively used much more effectively. And of course, today, everybody wants to use AI. They want to use generative AI. They want to use knowledge graph, if they're familiar with that yet, to really drive better analytics. And to do that, you need to have the high quality data that you're confident in, that you could rely upon, that's consistent, that's standardized, that's interoperable.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So I think we are at the end of the session. Good conversation, good questions. We're going to reach out to some of those whom we've not been able to address. We also would like to, as I mentioned, conduct some closed user group conversations, affinity groups, to drive some of these conversations forward. Some of you would agree to what we've said today. Some of you would probably not agree, and would be very happy to hear your views in terms of why do you agree or why don't you agree? And if you don't agree, then what is your alternate point of view? So that together and collectively, collaboratively, we can develop what we believe is the next frontier, the next layer, the next level in our education system. Thank you again. I would like to thank all the guests who joined us from the US, Europe, and Asia Pacific, and we look forward to developing this forward. We will have several other webinars in the data space specific to education, and please look forward to notifications on that. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.